everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Erica and I make videos all about making and selling candles. And in today's video, we are going to be talking all about wax melt and wax tarts. So before I go any further, I just want to let you guys know they're the same thing. So if you've seen them used online, they're used interchangeably. So a wax melt and a wax tart, the exact same thing. So what are they? They are a scented wax that you use in wax warmers. So they look like this, and this is the most common way that they're sold. So you've probably seen these in like Walmarts and Targets and everything. They're pretty popular. So these are called tart molds or clamshells, and these are just a way to be able to fit the wax in here and break it off into 6 individual cubes. The most common way that people use wax cubes is in these wax warmers. So these have a top that comes off right here, and that is going to hold the wax cube itself. Most people will use 2 cubes at a time, and they're able to just plug it in and turn it on. So there's a light bulb in here, and the heat from the light bulb is what's going to melt down the wax and disperse the scent in the room. A lot of people like to use wax melts more than candles, and they're actually becoming way more popular than what they used to, because people like the idea of not having an actual flame going on in their house. So it's a lot safer than a candle, and people like that it's easier and you don't have to have as much maintenance with it. You just turn it on and don't think about it. Now, when it comes to actually making the wax tarts, they're really simple, really easy, and you don't have to worry about wick sizes or melt pools or anything like that. It's more of just getting the ratio of the fragrance oil to the wax right, and making sure that you know how much wax can be able to fit inside of your tart melts. So for me, I fit 72 grams of wax and fragrance oil together inside of these tart melts, and it fills up to almost just the top. Sometimes when I'm pouring, I notice that I'll fill one a little bit too high, so the next one will be too low, and it's just a learning process of knowing when to stop pouring when you're looking at the tart melt itself, because if you're pouring, you can over pour and kind of spill over on the side, or you can under pour and have it look something. I had just broken this off, but this right here just kind of shows like an opening right there. So all of these would look like that if you under poured, because it's sinking down and it doesn't have a good layer on top to create a solid surface like how this one is. So you want to have a solid surface right there. You also want to try your best to make sure that you're filling each of the tarts as evenly as possible. One of the main things that you do need to know is that you need to choose a wax that's specifically made for tart melt. So this is called tart wax. This is different than container wax because this is specifically formulated to be a more solid and harder consistency and be able to hold a higher fragrance load. So for instance, if you were using something like 464 to make tart melts, which I know some people do and some people do like that, but I know that their fragrance load only goes up to about 10%. So with my tart wax that I'm using that's specifically for tarts, this one right here can actually hold up to 18% fragrance load. So you have a lot more of fragrance that's going to be dispersed into the room for your customer than by using a container wax, and it's specifically for tarts. So that's my whole spiel on that, but just look for tart wax. I'll leave some in the description box below so you guys can kind of check out different kinds of tart wax that you can look into. For me, I like to use, this is TW30. I get it from California Candle Supply, and it's an all natural soy tart wax. So I like that it's soy and it doesn't have any paraffin in it, because it goes with my candles, which are also all natural soy. So I like that I found one that is a phenomenal tart wax, but that it also can hold a really nice fragrance load and have a really nice scent throw as well. Now, when it comes to actually making tarts, you do it the same way when you're making candles. So I use just a regular pitcher. I do the double boiler method. So I get a little pot, fill it with about 1 inch of water, get that boiling and hot, and then I measure out my wax in grams on this scale, and then I just put that directly onto the pot. I get it really nice and hot. I get it to about 180 degrees, and at that point I will actually put in the dye chip when it's still really hot, because I want the dye chip to be able to blend and disperse evenly, because if I don't do that, I'll end up with little dots at the bottom of the wax tart because I didn't blend it properly. So when I'm at about 180, I'll start to stir it and I'll start to blend in the dye die chips, and these are the die chips that I use, again, from California Candle Supply, and they just look like little diamonds, and I'll break off a little piece and be able to put it right in there and then blend it up. And one thing with that you'll want to do, because you want to make sure that you're having consistent color for all of your wax tarts if you're choosing to dye your wax melts. So if you want to have a consistent color, I would keep a little journal handy, or even the note section of your phone, and just let your future self know how much of the dye chip you're using per how many melts you're making. So for instance, I typically will use half a dye chip per 6 melts, and that seems to be a good ratio for me. Sometimes I will do a half a dye chip for 9 melts, but that just really just depends on the color. If I want it darker, if I want it lighter, you know, whatever that is. After I've mixed it and I blend it in, then I will measure out my fragrance oil. At that point, I'll take it off of the burner. I'll let it go down to about 160, 170 degrees, and then I'll measure out the fragrance oil, pour it in, and stir it around for about a minute, and then I'll pour it into my tart melts. So when I'm filling it up, I try to make it as even as possible, because you don't want to overfill one and then have the other too low, you know, so I try to make them as even as possible with all the other ones, and that just takes practice. It's a little weird pouring it into a tart melt for the first time. I was really awkward with it for the first time, so you'll get the hang of it when you keep going with it. And then that's it. So after it's done, after you've poured it, make sure you're not bumping the table or anything. I've made that mistake before, and it completely ruins it. You have to completely take it out again, remelt it, and pour it back in, because otherwise it'll have these weird markings and weird bumps in it, and you don't want that. So you'll have to take it out and remelt it again. But the nice thing about those is that it's pretty simple to break it out, remelt it, and then re-pour it. It's not going to cause any issues, so that's really nice. But one of the things that you will notice when you're making your tart wax, if you are using soy like I am, is that you will get frosting on them. So if you can see on this one a little bit, let me open it up. So if you can see, there's a little bit of kind of white markings on there. That's called frosting. So if you don't know what frosting is basically a natural process that happens with soy wax. And what it is soy wax, when it's put into soy wax for candles and it's made into a candle, it's trying to pull away from the wax and go back to its natural state of just being soy. So it causes these little white markings on there, and it doesn't do anything. It doesn't change the way that it performs. It doesn't change the scent throw or anything like that. It's more of just the looks of it. For me personally, it doesn't bother me that much. There have been ones where I have made and the frosting was really bad, so I did want to pour it and then try to pour it back in at a lower temperature to try to eliminate the frosting. But for the most part, a lot of my melts don't have those issues. And right here, you know, so for the most part, most of them are pretty smooth, and I only have that issue every once in a while, and that just told me that I made it way too hot. So I try to cool it down as much as I can before pouring it, but still keeping it at a good hot temperature when it comes to blending everything together. So it's just a science, and most of the time when you're working with any kind of wax, it will come with directions. You will want to heat it up at the temperature that they suggest, and then pour it at their temperature that they suggest, and then that will probably give you the best results until you can find out what really works well for you when you're making your own tarts. Alternatively, something else to talk about is a different way that you're able to package wax melts and wax tarts. So something like this of being a clamshell, this is not the only way that you can do it. So people will use things such as silicone molds and have different shapes and patterns and different little things that they're working with when it comes to pouring and creating their melts, and they customize it to whatever they want the shapes to be. So you can order a bunch of different kinds of silicone molds and make your own wax melts, and it works the same way in the sense of how you have to melt down the wax and get everything together, and then you're pouring it directly onto the silicone mold and then waiting for that to harden, and then those become their own type of wax melts that can then go on the top of the wax melt holder. So there's just a bunch of different ways that you can do it, and you're able to kind of create it the way that that you want to. You don't have to use these plastic clamshell molds, and I know that later on in the future I'm probably not going to want to use these either because it's just too much plastic, but for right now it seemed like just the most compact way for me to get started. But so many people have created such cute little packaging for their wax melts that they make, and they have little bags or boxes, and they're able to package it up really differently than just in a little plastic clamshell. So there's a bunch of different ways that you can do it. But anyways guys, I hope this video was informative on what tart melts are, and if you guys have any further questions, please leave them in the comment section below. And if you guys like this video, please give it a thumbs up, as well as subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to follow me on Instagram at MemoryBoxCandleCo, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye guys.